Hi, physics. Mr. Janowski here. This is Chapter 9, Homework 6, Problem 5. So this is a ratio problem. It's actually two ratio problems. So you hold mass A over spring A. Well, your friend holds mass B at the same height over spring B. Mass A is 2 times as massive as mass B, but spring A is 3 times stiffer than spring B, which is to say K, the spring constant for A, is 3 times the spring constant for B. So what are we looking for here? So red pen for part A. Step, how do the initial GPEs of the two masses compare? So what we want is GPE A sub I, don't really need the I, frankly, over GPE of B sub I initial. So that's part A. This will equal question mark. And what units will it have? It's a ratio. It's not going to have units. So the next thing we do is we make a list. So we know something about the masses. How does mass A relate to mass B? Okay, mass A is 2 times as massive as mass B, so the number is 2. I'm going to keep the 0.00 for reasons of significant figures. But yeah, mass A is 2 times as massive as mass B. So what that means is mass A has 2.00, the mass of mass B. So that number goes on the right. But spring A is 3 times stiffer than spring B. Okay, so, well, it's written right there. What that means is K sub A is 3.00, K sub B. And we know one other thing. We know these things are at the same height. That's going to end up being important. So how does height of A relate to height of B? Well, it's the same thing. So h of A and h of B. So where do we go from here? We want the initial GPEs. So let's write the formula for GPE at this point. GPE is equal to MGH. All right, so for part A, start by writing this. Whoop. Actually, you know what? I should plan this out a little bit better. Let me put A down here. I want my step is going there. But yeah, we're going to start by writing this. This is going to let us build a little math problem that we can do. So GPE sub A, I'm going to leave the I off. It is the initial one, but we don't need it. Over GPE sub B. So this is equal to something over something. Make the top thing equal to the top thing. GPE sub A is going to be mass of A times G times H of A. GPE sub B, we'll make the bottom thing equal to the bottom thing. That's going to be mass of B times G times H sub B. All right, things can cancel now. G is certainly equal to G, so that goes away. We do also know that H sub A is equal to H sub B. So H sub A over H sub B, well, that goes away too. That's just 1. So we're left just with MA over MB. So now, do we keep or replace these things? So start with M sub A. Let's look at it. It's very easy to replace it. So let's replace it. 2.00 M sub B. And on the bottom, keep or replace it. It would be tricky to replace it, so we're going to keep it. So M sub B. So something cancels here. M sub B over M sub B goes away, and we get 2. So that's our answer. That's what the ratio is equal to. GPE-A over GPE-B. You could write it like that, or you could write it the way I wrote it up here. I'm not going to rewrite it. Let's save a little bit of time. You could write it like that. Multiply both sides by GPE sub B, and you get that. Part B. What are we looking for in part B? When all of the GPE is converted into EPE in the two springs, how will their EPEs compare? So what we want is how do their EPEs compare? So EPE of A, really this is EPE of A final. This will be the after part of the situation, over EPE sub B final. And this will be equal to question mark. So what do we know here? We know that when all of the GPE is converted into the EPE in the two springs, okay? Let's go back to blue here. So what we want, start with this. EPE sub A final over EPE. I'm getting ahead of myself. Not A, B on the bottom. EPE sub B final is going to be equal to something over something. All right. I mean, we could use this formula. But it's actually not time for that formula yet. This is the idea we're going to use here. All of that GPE is converted into EPE. So what does that mean? That means EPE sub A final, well, that's going to be equal to GPE sub A initial. We started with GPE at the beginning of the problem. We ended up with EPE at the end of the problem. And a similar thing on the bottom. EPE of B final is going to be GPE of B initial. So the energy for mass B that started off as GPE ends up being EPE. All right, well, I already know what this equals. GPE of A over GPE of B ends up equaling 2. So that's my answer. No more math needed for part B. Part B was easy. Oh, sorry. That's a final. A B final. Yep. That's where I'm drawing the box. Okay, so we have that. Now for part C. What are we looking for in part C? How will the compressions compare? So for part C, what we really want is the ratio of the compressions. So X sub A final over X sub B. So another ratio, this equals question mark. We don't know the units. How can we get there? Start with our answer for part B. So this one's a little bit different, the way this one works out. So let's start with exactly that. This is going to look a little bit weird the way I'm writing this. I already know what's going to happen. So this is equal to EPE. 2 is equal to EPE of A over EPE of B. Okay. So make the top thing equal to the top thing. EPE of A is 1/2 K sub A, X sub A squared at the bottom is 1/2 K sub B, X sub B squared. Okay, the halves cancel. And what is this equal to? Okay, well, remember, this is equal to 2. We actually know what this is equal to. That's going to come back and be important in a second. So for now, let's do the keep or replace thing. KE sub A, that's very easy to replace. KE sub A is equal to 3, not KE, I'm sorry. K sub A is equal to 3K sub B. So that's very easy to replace. So we will replace it. 3.00 K sub B X sub A squared. And on the bottom, K sub B. That's tricky to replace, so we're going to leave that one. K sub B times X sub B squared. All right, at this point, the K sub B's cancel. And what is this equal to? All right, I'm writing more than I need to, but let me make it clear because something maybe a little bit tricky is going to happen here. 3 times X sub A squared over X sub B squared. And what is this equal to? This is equal to 2.00, this thing from the beginning. So what that really means is X sub A squared over X sub B squared is equal to 2.00 over 3.00. So it's 2/3. So 0.6 bar. Do you see what I did there? I just divided both sides by 3. But I don't want X sub A squared over X sub B squared. I want X sub A over X sub B. So how do I get that? I'm going to end up taking the square root of both sides. And if I do that, that's going to give me x sub a over x sub b, and that is what I want. So now I just need the square root of 2/3. So in my calculator, 2 divided by 3, take that to the 1/2 power, and I end up with 0.81649. But because the other numbers are in 3 sig figs, I'm going to leave this one in 3 sig figs. So that's my answer. So it is a ratio problem. It's just a little bit different of a ratio problem. So even if you can't predict where all the math is going to lead you, just start doing the math. Start canceling what you can cancel and see what you're left with. And hopefully eventually you get to the right place. So hopefully you found that helpful.